I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show. Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook.
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
Siege, we have a lot to get to on this podcast. The very first one post Stanley Cup. But before I ask you all the questions for all the takeaways, how many hours of sleep have you had?
Probably about 3, and they were all in an airplane seat. So if I'm a little punchy or a little slow or whatever, however that manifests itself on this episode, you're going to get the raw, unfiltered stuff again, because I'm not at my sharpest as we record this episode.
I'm just glad I can see your pupils.
Oh yeah. It wasn't like a big night of partying. It's just by the time, it was really cool. We were back on the ice with the team that won the cup, which is the first time since St. Louis won the cup in 2019, at TD Garden was the last time I did that. And it's literally my favorite night of the entire year. Everything I do is like getting to go on the ice right after a team's won a Stanley Cup. You see the family members pour on. There's tears, there's hugs, there's screaming, there's happiness, there's photos, there's lots of swear words. And I mean, it's just such a release of emotion. And let's face it, winning that Stanley Cup, if you're someone like Andrew Cogliano or Eric Johnson, Jack Johnson, the Nazem Kadri, players that have been around the league a long time, it's a culmination of a family's journey plus their own journey. And so, man, it was invigorating to be there for that. And, by the time though you do those interviews, filed a story, it was maybe 2:30 when I was leaving Amalie Arena, and my flight was at 7. And so I made the executive decision to join some of the other reporters at a bar called Hat Tricks, which is a hockey spot, and they stayed open till 4:30. So again, it wasn't like a big party because I didn't get there till 2:30, but it was a nice way to cap what was, I think a great season in the NHL and certainly a great Stanley Cup playoffs.
Who are you kicking it with at Hat Tricks? Who are the homies?
Pretty much everybody. Mark Messier was there. Chris Chelios was there. But obviously all my reporting brethren, Pierre LeBrun, Kevin Bieksa, Elliot Friedman, David Amber, a whole group of my buddies. I'm quite close with some Swedish and Finnish reporters that cover the NHL. They were all there. What was actually really neat, and I've become friends with them, but Arturi Lekkonen's father, Ismo, does television in Finland. And I've come to know him over these Stanley Cups. He's done it. And last night, this was actually maybe the coolest thing. Is before I got on the ice, I came down with maybe 30 seconds left in the game. I came off the media elevator. I went into the area where we're doing there, and Ismo's there. And like, he gave me this giant hug, and he's just like, what the fuck just happened? Like, he just saw his kid win the Stanley Cup. Ismo's an old hockey coach, and Arturi, as it turns out, scored the winning goal in the game, as he did in overtime for the Habs to go to the Cup final last year, overtime for the Avs to go to the Cup final this year. Scored a big goal, I know, in the bubble for Montreal to get through the qualifying round. He scored 2 goals when he won a Swedish league title in 2016 with Frölunda. So, Lekkonen, if you look at his professional career, doesn't score a ton, but when he scores, man, he makes those goals count. And, to share that moment with his dad was kind of neat. And he was at Hat Tricks too. And then I said to Ismo, I was like, go to the Avalanche party, man. Like, I think it's probably a tough spot for him to be in because he sort of is a media member and obviously he wants to give his son space. But I was like, you never know if this will happen again. And the Avs were partying at the JW Marriott, which is just up the street. And he did eventually leave and go join them there. So I hope he had a good night because I didn't see him this morning.
Yeah, I like that. That's a cool. This is exactly why we do this damn podcast, for stories like this. That is awesome to hear the story with Ismo, because he got to obviously cover last year's final too. And Arturi Lekkonen unfortunately did not work out for him the way that he would have wanted. But for him to just enjoy it on the ice, I think even Ismo, like, he was taking his time. He didn't even join his son right away on the ice because he wanted him to celebrate it. Like I kind of like that side story amongst all the celebratory stories that have come out of the Stanley Cup final.
Well, and get this. So Finland is an awesome hockey country. Like
Yes.
it's legitimately the number one sport in that country. It might be the only other place on earth other than Canada where you can say it's truly the number one national sport. Before last night, there had only ever been 14 Finns that have won a Stanley Cup, like relatively few. And, Arturi Lehkonen comes from Turku, Finland. Nobody has ever brought the cup to Turku, Finland. But get this, Mikko Rantanen and Arturi Lehkonen grew up together. So it's going to come with two guys the same age that played hockey together when they were 10 years old. They're going to both bring it there, I would imagine, on consecutive days. And, for a hockey-loving country, it's such a big deal to bring it back to a town where the cup has never been. I think that's so neat. I was lucky growing up in Coburg. Shout out Coburg. Justin Williams brought the cup there 2 of the 3 times he won it. And I just know when you're from a smaller place or, something like Coburg has 10 NHLers. We had one lottery ticket, and it happened to be a good one because it was Mr. Game 7. So he managed to get the cup back there a couple times. And Steve Smith did actually in the 80s as well with the Oilers. But, it's a huge deal. And so I know Ismo was already looking forward to the big party he's going to have at his house on the island there in Turku.
So let's get to the ice then. When you were on the ice and you're seeing all of the players celebrating the Stanley Cup, we know on the broadcast we're only able to see so much. And we can get into what Nazem Kadri said and some of the other stuff that was said. What's like the best thing you saw when you're on the ice? Coolest thing, notable thing, heartwarming moment?
There's so many to choose from.
Yeah.
But one that stands out to me, the obvious one actually is the first player. So when I walked on, the first player that I went to look for and grab was Nazem Kadri. I decided I was going to write my story about him. And in the chaos of that, you really have to prioritize, because at a certain part, the media were always welcome on the ice, but you want to get your interview out of the way quickly. You recognize that the players are there to celebrate. Anyway, so, talk to Nazem maybe for 4 or 5 minutes. And then we were there when his family came on, his dad, Sam, his mom, Sue, his wife, Ashley. And they had a pretty cool, when they first saw each other moment where they're jumping around the ice and hugging. But then, and so that one jumps to mind. But then another one I saw was a little later on. And I just looked over at the side of the rink. And again, it's chaos out there. And Nathan McKinnon and his dad were just off to the side, just kind of embracing. It wasn't jubilation. It was almost just tender. And, I can't know. I don't know what they were saying to each other, but it was, again, we celebrate it because it's a sport, and obviously, there's a lot of money at stake and this and that. But at the end of the day, I feel like the Stanley Cup kind of is about the families or the people that put pebbles down in your development and helps you get to a moment where you can realize sort of the ultimate glory in the sport. And so, I would imagine that's gone on in the McKinnon family for a long time for him to become one of the best players in the world. And that I don't know, it sort of stuck out to me. But honestly, there's so many tears and, people that are happy. Lehkonen actually, an hour after they won, he's still in full gear and skates on everything. He was literally on his knees on the ice, FaceTiming someone. I don't know who he was FaceTiming, but it's I think he was just exhausted. He couldn't even stand anymore. And all of that stuff. And then honestly, so then I go back and I'm basically in the bowels of the arena where the media room is. I'm writing my story. Our colleagues are there. And we were there when the Avalanche players started leaving to go back to their hotel. And that was pretty funny. Landeskog, he's got the cup, and there's certain reporters he knows. He's yelling in Swedish at Per Bjurman, the reporter from Aftonbladet. They went to Henrik Sjöberg. He's yelling at him. He's yelling at Peter Baugh from The Athletic.
Yeah.
It's so much fun, man. It's just pure unbridled joy at the end of this crazy war of attrition. Not to make it about war, I realize there's more, but it's such a physical challenge to win a cup, right? We saw on both sides of this. When Tampa finally releases its injury list, I fear we're going to need 3 pages to get through it all. And you probably saw Val Nichushkin's foot that he couldn't walk out of the arena last night. They were wheeling him on a dolly. And his foot looks gruesome, and he played 23 minutes. What a beast. Kadri's hand was mangled. He had a 6-week time frame for the recovery from his thumb surgery, and he came back in 2. He took 1 face-off in that series because he basically couldn't, and he scored one goal, and it happened to be a pretty big one, if you recall. So, I mean, I realize I'm all over the place here, but that's how you experience it, right? It's just everywhere you look is just these awesome moments. And it's funny, even Julian, one of the, I think it was the skills or skating coach's son stopped me on the ice. He's like, "Love the pod."
Oh my God.
Like, and then among that, like, some people recognize you, right, and want to talk to you. So it was really neat, and my heart's full again. I covered the 2 cups, right? I covered 2021, and that was close to normal because we were back in Tampa where they eliminated the Canes. It was a full building, but we didn't get that experience. We weren't where the families were. We didn't get the same feeling for what was going on. And in 2020 in Edmonton, I was, in the arena, in the bubble. There was maybe 20 people in the big giant rink when Tampa won that first cup. It was like the quickest cup pass ever because there was no one to look at in the crowd really and cheer them, right? So just like, anyway, that was, man, we're getting back to normal, man. We're going to have a normal season next year. I'm feeling it. I'm manifesting that in the universe because that's what I'm feeling coming out of this season.
Don't apologize, by the way, for saying you're all over the place with describing what it was like on the ice, because I totally imagine if you're in that situation, that's what it is, because you're seeing such jubilation from everybody. And if you're trying to get a story together, like you're all over the place. So that is as accurate of a description as you could provide.
Right. And look, that was my 16th straight Stanley Cup final. I've seen a few of those things. Like, you always think back to, I'm telling you, it's my favorite thing ever. I mean, it's so nice to see people win and be rewarded, right? There's, so many great players pass through the game, unfortunately, and don't get a chance to win. We could go down the list, it's relevant today. Daniel Alfredson, the Sedin brothers, they played a game 7 in 2011 and came out on the wrong end of it.
Roberto
Luongo, like so many good people and great players don't get that chance. And so it's hard not to get swept up in how beautiful it is to see people win, and imagine being Nathan MacKinnon, like, all joking aside or what have you, like, he's from Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia, the suburb of Halifax, just happens to have been born, a few years after Sidney Crosby, who's brought the cup back 3 times. They're next door neighbors on the lake there. Like, you're competitive. Like, there's a lot of pressure to do that. I'm sure internal pressure. You can see it with Nathan. He's such a serious, driven guy, focused guy. And so it's cool to see him reach the top of the mountain and put his name in the silver edges of that cup. And, we'll see if they can do it again. I mean, the Avalanche have the pieces to be back there again and again, but there's a lot of work to be done this offseason too.
I want to eventually get to what's next for the Avs and the Lightning. Obviously, we got to get to David Bastl. We're going to touch off on the Hockey Hall of Fame. And because it's Monday, we're going to get to Ask CJ. There's just one other thing I want to ask with on ice stuff before we, advance the show a little bit. How long did it take until you had heard the quote from Nazem Kadri, which says the following: "For everyone that thought I was a liability in the playoffs, you can kiss my ass"?
I actually heard it before we went on the ice. I didn't hear him say it because it was on the Canadian broadcast, CBC broadcast, and we were playing the ESPN one when we were waiting to go on the ice. But I saw James Myrtle tweet it out, and then, quickly soon after, a whole bunch of other people as well. And so it's funny because we asked him kind of to expand on that. He's like, "I already said what I was going to say." So, like, it was clear. It's fine. But, that was our job. We had a chance to sort of advance that story potentially. And it's clear he wanted to get that message out there, but he didn't want to get into it too much more than that.
Okay, that's fair. But I mean, come on, we can kind of read between the lines here. There were a lot of people who thought the old Nazem Kadri is going to come out and was going to get himself suspended, and he ends up having a spectacular postseason and scores. We brought up the Game 4 OT winner. That's arguably the most important goal of this series, because if that's a 2-2 series instead of 3-1 for the Avs, who knows what this looks like? I might be drinking pickle juice on Thursday.
Right. And the hat trick against St. Louis, that'll stand out to me too in round 2. I think that'll be remembered. I mean, he is a gamer. I texted a bit with Dallas Aikens last night. He's the Anaheim Ducks coach, but he was actually Kadri's first coach with the Toronto Marlies back in the day. And he said, I should have the quote in front of me, but he said something like his intangible is grit. He's a gamer. And he talked about his respect for the Kadri family. Sam, Nazem's father, has been a huge role model in his life. Sam never played hockey, but he immigrated to London, Ontario with his parents from Lebanon in the 60s. And one of the ways he assimilated the Canadian culture was to get into hockey. He actually became a Montreal Canadiens fan and passed that on to Nazem when he was young, and had this vision of Nazem, being a pro hockey player. And obviously here we are 800, 900 NHL games later, and Stanley Cup party is going to be had in London. I'm sure that'll probably keep people up late at night too. So, I mean, there's so many threads that tie us all. And you're right. Kadri look, at some of it was his own doing. Like, we can't ignore the fact that, he's the one who crossed the line. We might argue some of the suspensions were harsh or what have you, but I mean, he still put himself in a position to be suspended in 3 playoff series. He put himself in that position where the Leafs felt they had to move on from him. But, I don't know exactly who that's aimed at. I don't know if it's sort of people like commentators and reporters that might have said it was time to move him, or you couldn't trust him, or if it's maybe more pointed at the Leafs organization that, he didn't elaborate, and I don't want to speculate.
That's very fair. And with that, it's time to bring on David Bastl from Sports Interaction. As always, 19 plus if you are wanting to play Sports Interaction. We ask that you play responsibly, and there is a link to responsible gaming strategies in the description of this show. Welcome to You Can Bet That with David Bastl. Remember to hit up sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all of your gaming needs. It hasn't even really, we're a full day after the NHL season has officially come to an end, and we are already thinking of who is going to win the Stanley Cup next year. Who's going to win the Stanley Cup next year, David?
Great question. You know what? Odds makers, and they do this every sport, every year. As soon as that trophy is handed out, Julian, Chris, they what are the odds for next year? Give it to me within hours of it. So of course it should come as no surprise that Colorado 5-1 favorites to win the Stanley Cup next year. We'll see about that. Tampa Bay 9-1 favorites to return and win that Stanley Cup as well. So the two teams that we saw usually are up there, unless we know or people have already heard that, they're going to be missing 10 stars or something of that nature. Now the Avalanche are they're going to have to be busy. Joe Sakic has to make a lot of important decisions, Chris. So I'm not sure if 5-1 is even remotely worth the value, considering that Sakic's going to have to work some of that magic behind the scenes.
It's funny because I was the jerk on the ice at Amalie Arena in the celebration. I said to him, how quickly do you have to get to work now? Because he does have so many unrestricted free agents. He had a funny answer. He said in a couple of days. He goes, but it's definitely not tonight. So he's not doing any negotiating, even though a few of the agents were on the ice with their players in the celebration. But it would be a hard thing for me to forecast in general. I mean, obviously each team has some degree of questions, but with Colorado, you're looking at Kadri, Nichushkin, Burakovsky, Darcy Kemper, all being unrestricted free agents. Even some of their depth guys, Darren Helm and Cogliano. I mean, it's just Jack Johnson. Hard to know what that team will look like, but if they got Cale Makar and Nathan McKinnon, they got a chance.
DB, we know how good the Avs could be next year. Looking at the Lightning as well. What about for Canadian teams? Of all the Canadian teams, who stands to have the best chance at winning the Stanley Cup next season?
Well, no surprise, just because it's such a public team as well, because of where they are and how many people live in that province. It's the Toronto Maple Leafs right now at 9-1 at Sports Interaction. And quickly running down the numbers quickly, the Oilers are number 2, Flames number 3, Jets Canucks are neck and neck for 5, Senators and Montreal Canadiens at 118-1. Of course, they'll be selecting the first overall selection early next week, or I should say late next week. So changes there are going to happen as well. But I'm not sure how many flyers are going to take on any of these Canadian teams, Chris. But right now, no surprise, the Leafs taking the same amount of odds as the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Ooh, I mean, look, there's no reason to think they're going to be poor next year. They were the best team in Canada last season in the regular season. You have to bank at some point. Maybe they get over the hump. I don't think with the core they have, it's not a crazy, thing to put your mind around. But again, we got to figure out who's going to be playing net on opening night for the Leafs before I'd be too comfortable putting that wager down.
I also would not ask, but who's going to be in goal for the Edmonton Oilers as well? I'm a bit surprised that they're ranked at second on that list. But yeah, I just want to just mention with the Senators and the Canadiens at the bottom. David, we were talking about it just off air before we started going here. I wonder who's actually going to be worse between those two teams, just because there's so many questions around the Canadiens and what they could look like. The Senators, they thought that they were a lot farther ahead in their development last year compared to what they actually ended up being. So I'm actually genuinely curious who do you think between those two will actually be the worst of those two teams?
Well, right now, the Senators are at 72-1. Montreal Canadiens, as I mentioned, at 118-1. And when you look at that, guys, I don't know about you, but you think about Shane Wright likely, goes first overall and likely plays an entire season. So there's another piece to this Canadiens pie. What do they do in free agency? What do the Sens do in free agency? A team that really, for the most part, not that busy when it comes to free agency. So are we really putting that much of a discretion between those two teams? Because Chris, I don't know about you, but you know what? If the Sens are slightly better than the Canadiens, I don't think it's by that much. When you look at 72-1 and 118-1, I'm not going to say neck and neck because I want to see what these rosters look like, but I think they're closer than what the odds makers are making out right now.
That's fair. The one point of differentiation is I think Ottawa will try to be reasonably aggressive in free agency. They certainly have money to spend. Pierre Dorian's, hinted at wanting to, push for a playoff spot next year, whereas Montreal is still kind of in cap jail. They're not probably going to be spending in the open market till 2023. So, I guess if you're trying to project how that might work, maybe Ottawa's bringing in some more frontline players. But I'm with you. There's not a huge gap there, at least on paper, as we're sitting here today.
David Bastl, thank you so much for hanging out with CJ and myself. Don't forget to check out sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all the best odds before game, in game, and the best props. Again, sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. We'll talk to you on Thursday.
Thanks, guys.
So now that the dust has settled with the Stanley Cup final, what's next for Colorado and for Tampa Bay? What's an easier team to tackle with that first? Do you want to talk about what's next for Colorado, or do you want to talk about what's next for Tampa first?
I think Tampa is probably the easier one to break down because, they have, in my eyes, one really big decision, and it's what becomes of Andre Palat, who's been a player that had multiple, basically every big goal it felt like they had this playoffs was scored by him, or most of them. Steven Stamkos had his moments too, certainly. But, Palat is a notable free agent, and I don't know if there's a path to him staying there. He's been a $5.3 million player. His numbers are still strong and his experience level strong. I'm sure that the man in the marketplace would be there, but he's also sort of born and raised the Lightning. Was a 7th round pick, 4th from last draft pick in 2011, and is made the AHL team the next year. So he jumped straight from being a 7th round pick into the American Hockey League is unusual. Usually teams let those players, cook in junior, or if they're, in a European league, leave them over there for a few years and figure out what they have. But he spent 11 years, almost all of it exclusively with John Cooper as his head coach too, because John was with them in the AHL and then, was part of bringing him up to the NHL. And so I don't know if they can find a way to get this done. Looking at it, it seems unlikely, impossible, but I think that there's a will there to try to make it happen, and maybe he's in the mind to give them a discount. One thing Julian Breezeball said actually at the start of the Stanley Cup final is he looks around his organization, he sees people that have sacrificed physically, sort of emotionally, mentally, but also financially. Because there are players on this roster that have taken less than market value. I know it's a no tax state, and there's some benefits for them there, but they've kind of built an organization players don't want to leave. And so I think Palat is the big decision. Nick Paul's a free agent who they traded for at the deadline. Jan Ruda's a free agent. I see those players likely moving on. And again, I think in a perfect world, they'd all like to stay. It's a great spot to play. It's a great team, but the hard cap forces hard decisions. And we've seen players leave the Lightning each of the past couple of years because of that fact.
Before we bring up what the Avs need to do, I have a question. Mm-hmm. So the Lightning, back-to-back Stanley Cup championships, they have a 3rd consecutive year where they go to the final. Is that enough? And you can even add in the fact that they went in 2015 and they've been this dominant team for a while. Have the Lightning done enough in your eyes to still be considered a dynasty?
Not at this point. I think they got to win one more. They're so close though. Like I say that with respect. Like I came out of this series with so much respect for those guys. Like I don't even know how they pushed it to where they had a lead in game 6. You know, they had a chance potentially to force a 7th game. You know, those guys are injured. I mean, half the bench at some point in the series had to go down the tunnel because they're blocking shots and getting treatments. You know, I saw Steven Stamkos walking out of Amalie Arena, you know, obviously looking disappointed, but also looking like, you know, he wasn't at full percentage. Anthony Cirelli was barely holding it together. I mean, they didn't have Braden Point essentially from game 7 of the first round on. I know he played game 1 and 2 of the Cup final, but clearly wasn't himself. You know, that group really willed its way to doing something, coming very close to doing something we might never see over the next 30, 40 years. I'm not sure we'll see any team win 3 in a row as long as there's a hard cap in place. But I still think they need to win one more. I still think they can win one more. Would not surprise me at all if a year from now we're having this conversation and we're down to Tampa at the Cup final. Like I don't think they're going away, and that's maybe an extension of the discussion we're having about the decisions they face this offseason. You know, I think probably the 2 biggest decisions after Platt are, you know, Mikhail Sergachev and Anthony Cirelli both are 1 year out from free agency, and so you know I think that you'll see them sign extensions potentially this summer. And you know what that will do is it'll lock in place, you know, core members of the team into the future. And so obviously some players are going to come and go. Some guys will age off the roster or maybe price themselves off the roster. But I mean, this is a smart front office. It's a well-run team. It's got maybe the best owner in the entire league. Certainly Jeff Vinnick is in the conversation for being among the best owners, and it's a small group. And so I think they'll be back, but I'm not putting the dynasty on them until they win a 3rd.
See, here's my thing with Tampa, though. As good as they are, I wonder how much everyone else in the Eastern Conference will actually catch up and put them at a point where they catch them off guard in the playoffs and knock them off. Like I'm thinking of a Toronto, thinking of a New York Rangers. I'm even going to put Carolina in there. Florida. I mean, I know they had a terrible end to their year, but that's still a really good hockey club there. And I don't know if you feel it too, but there's always something off about these teams who go all the way to the Stanley Cup final and lose. Like the hangover, we talk about the hangover after you win. There seems to be a weird hangover when you lose where it kind of affects how you play. I don't know if you read it into the same way that I might be feeling, but I don't necessarily know if it's that clear cut for the Lightning to make it back to the Stanley Cup final for 4th straight year. That is incredible if they do that.
Right. I mean, I'm working backwards. I mean, we have Tampa in 2022 that lost. You have Montreal in 2021. You have Dallas in 2020. You have Boston in 2019. You have Vegas in 2018. It was 2017 Nashville or San Jose. I mean, it was those 2 teams, 16 and 17. You're right. Like none of those teams have made it back in the subsequent years. You know, even if you go back to 2016, the only one you have to all the way to 2015, which was Tampa losing to Chicago, and obviously they've since gotten back and won the Cup. So, you know, maybe you're onto something there. But I also think Tampa was different than some of those Cup finalists, and I say that with respect. But like Dallas and Montreal probably weren't the number 2 strong teams in the league those years.
Absolutely not.
They got on a heater. They played well defensively. They got great goaltending. Maybe got a favorable path through their part of the bracket. I mean, I'm not ripping on those teams by any means. I think if you get there, you get there. But you know, they were maybe a little bit fortunate to get there. Whereas I don't see Tampa as being fortunate in this case, really. I mean, the question is just how long can their key guys continue to be effective? Like at a certain point, when Stamkos and Hedman aren't Stamkos and Hedman, maybe that becomes really hard for them if those guys aren't making differences. You know, maybe Vasilevsky. I mean, he's still young, but he's played a lot of games, and you know, if he falls off, I mean, those are the things that hurt you. But they've just got so many players signed at the right number or even below value. I can't see them falling apart by any stretch. You know, they do strike me as a team that's probably not winning the Atlantic Division in the regular season. Like I think that they'll conserve to a certain degree, but no one's going to want to face them when it comes playoff time.
Absolutely not. They don't need to win the Atlantic Division. They proved it with how they played this year. What about the Avalanche? Unless there was a thought you wanted to say with the Lightning. I don't mean to cut you off.
I just was going to say they started all 4 series on the road. So, I mean, that says something there. And they got to the final and, the margins weren't that big in this Cup final. Like Colorado was definitely the better team, deserved to win, but Tampa lost 2 games in overtime, and they even lost Game 6 2-1. Now they had nothing left in the third period. Had 4 shots on goal. They didn't get the first until halfway through from center ice. So credit to the Avs, they shut that game down. But the Lightning were 1 bounce or 1 more power play or whatever, potentially from winning or getting it to 7. So pretty remarkable run by them. I think when it comes to Colorado, there's just so many question marks. Let's just start with the fact they have 3 of their, not the highest end forwards, but 3 of their top forwards, and Andrei Burakovsky, Nazem Kadri, and Valeri Nichushkin, who are all free agents. I think at this point it's clear Burakovsky is going to test free agency. He's likely gone. Not because he doesn't like it there, but it's just so much money to spend and a great opportunity for him maybe to go and be signed to get more minutes on a team that isn't as deep up front. The Kadri one's going to be a really close call. This one strikes me where there's a will, there's a way. And based on what I can tell, there's a will from Nazem Kadri to want to stay in Colorado. I believe he really does want to stick with that team if it can work. But, we've talked about this before. If he hits the open market, I think he's getting 7 years from another team. And I think it's $7 to $8 million a year, maybe even a little bit more, depending on where the bidding goes. And so I don't see how Colorado can make that fit. And so they're going to have to get creative. I mean, maybe they give him 8 years. It sounds crazy. He's going to be 32 at the start of next season. So there'd be huge risk in that. So, I don't know if they'll be able to get it done. I do think that Nichushkin, though, is likely to be back. He loves it there. He's a beast. I mean, we talked about him being injured with his foot, but he scored 4 goals in the Cup final series. He had his best year production-wise. He's such a big, powerful skater. So I think he fits in really well with the system, and he's a little bit younger than Kadri, right? So, if you're signing him a bit longer term, you're buying more of the years that you can expect positive value back from. So, I do think one of those 3 guys is back for sure, of those forwards, potentially 2. But, it's going to be, I think it's going to be a hard decision between business and heart for Nazem Kadri because, I think reasonably he can earn more money on the open market, but I know he loves it in Denver and he's found a really good fit with the Avalanche.
And all those players you're talking about, that's who they have to deal with this year because there's one guy who's really happy about his Stanley Cup who's going to eventually want some more money on top of his contract that he still has to run out to this point, and that's Nathan MacKinnon.
Right, and that's probably the biggest piece of business. He can sign that contract as of July 13th. I'm told the plan is still for the Avs and his agents to sit down, probably let the hangover wear off here for a couple of days, but sit down and early this summer and hammer out what his next extension looks like. Nathan MacKinnon's previously indicated in interviews that, obviously he's been probably one of the most positive value players consistently the last 3 or 4 seasons. I mean, making $6 million and change and performing like a guy making 12 or 13 million. That's a huge reason why the Avalanche have become the team they are. And, that's going to expire. I don't know how much of a discount he's going to give them. He's sort of made it sound like, he wants to be paid fairly, but he's not going to push it to the limits. But I think he could make a case to even pass McDavid if he wanted to, keeping in mind that McDavid signed that contract years ago. So based on percentage of cap and, if you're projecting out the cap's going to jump, significantly during the time that this contract will run, I don't think it would be crazy for him to ask for 13 million or 13.5 million. But I'm not sure he's going to do that. So, that'll sort of set them up for what we see in the season starting 2023 and beyond. But you got to do that. And then they got to figure out a goaltender. If Darcy Kemper hits the open market, they have all those depth players I mentioned that, okay, maybe you retain 1 or 2 of them, but if you don't, you got to be finding, you have to have internal depth. I mean, obviously the Avalanche are hoping Alex Newhook can grow into a larger role in the team. He's part of this team. I think Bowen Byram had a great series.
Yes, he did.
In the Cup final and sort of showed you, because he's very young too, that he's part of a really bright future, but he's going to need a new contract. So man, there's a lot of moving pieces there. They do have cap space, but it's going to go quickly because these players have all earned raises.
Last thing from Colorado before we move on to other topics here. We managed to go through however long of us recording the show, and we didn't even get into the postseason that was for Cale Makar, who ends up ending the postseason as playoff MVP. The only other guy to have won playoff MVP before his 24th birthday, Bobby Orr. Like, we're at a point now where we can have Cale Makar and Bobby Orr in the same sentence. I think that is one of the coolest storylines that has come out of this postseason. The fact that Cale Makar is on pace to be this amazing offensive-minded defenseman who can defend very well too, but just Cale Makar just being this outstanding, great player.
What a treat to watch this guy do his thing. And he's so humble too. So he seems like such a nice kid and great family. His parents were around here for the cup celebrations. I mean, man, I wish we had saw that Olympic tournament. Not to like make this
me too.
Weird, but like we could have like Cale Makar on Team Canada with everybody. I mean, you know the names, you know what I'm talking about. Like,
oh yeah,
would have just been a sick team. And he had a ridiculously good playoffs. I mean, there is no limit to what he can do. Like, I think he's the best defenseman in the world already. That might be a little too soon to say that. I don't know. Maybe you think he's got to knock off a Victor Hedman or, guys who've been there and getting nominated for the Norris every year. But Makar just had a special playoffs. He just goes for it. Like, I've never seen a guy quite play like that. Like, there's maybe some shades of peak Erik Karlsson in that, the way he's able to really control the play and so much flows through him. But I mean, the plays he made, like some of the stuff that just goes unnoticed, the way he'll get the puck in his own zone. Like, I was asking a bunch of the former players hanging around, like nobody had a comparison for him, like a true comparison. Like, I asked some of the former NHLers, like, was there anyone in your day that kind of reminds you of this or that you saw? And like, I didn't get one answer. And I didn't see Bobby Orr play. I know he revolutionized the position. He's one of the all-time legends of the sport, but I can't make that comparison myself just because I didn't see him play. And I think so much time has passed. It's a different game. But, we might be seeing Makar revolutionize his position again or being the next part of the evolution of what we ask a defenseman to do or expect him to do. And it's pretty crazy what he needs to build a new trophy case. Like, the last week has been insane. A Norris, a Cup, and a Conn Smythe. Like, that's Hall of Fame stuff right there. And you're 23 years old. Like, it's nuts.
It's ridiculous, man. And seeing, yes, it is. He is very much deserving of the honor of being ridic, because the speed on the ice, the way he's able to cut through a defense if he wants to, his ability to handle the puck. Just one of the best things about seeing Cale Makar do his thing is when the Avs just are in the offensive zone and they're cycling the puck around and Cale Makar has the puck and he's holding on to it and he's trying to just see, all right, well, do I want to shoot? Do I want to pass? And the way he's just handling the puck, like he has the best handle of any. I know we use that term for basketball and how we look at point guards. He has the best handles of any NHL player I think I've ever seen. He's just so fun to watch in that.
It's like got a yo-yo, right? Like, he can just move
exactly
it back and forth, and it's wild. Like, he might score like 35 or 40 goals one year as a defenseman. I don't want to even put a ceiling on him. I don't even want to, like, he could get 100 points. Like, I think anything is possible. Like, Paul Coffey, Brian Leetch numbers are in this guy's future, and his present is, he's just an awesome player. So it was pretty cool to see him win too. And you just can't help but wonder, like, all the great things still to come. Like, that resume is just starting, and it's starting at a pretty special place.
And the Colorado Avalanche, if they're able to get everything together in terms of signing guys back and putting together a good team, we may very well be at the beginning of their true power in the National Hockey League. But at the very least, they can say they are the Stanley Cup champions of right now in our year of our Lord 2022. And you know what that means, Siege? You on Thursday have to provide your stick taps en français, s'il vous plaît, monsieur.
Hoi, c'est dommage.
c'est dommage en Chris.
My French is so poor, but I got a couple days. I got to get some sleep before I have to do that. I can't use that part of my brain right now.
Yeah, at the very least. Okay, let's move on to another big announcement that was made on Monday. Hockey Hall of Fame class of 2022. Just going over some of the names. Herb Carnegie will be entered in as a builder. Probably the best black player to have never played in the National Hockey League. Daniel Alfredsson, the best Ottawa Senator we've ever seen. Roberto Luongo, we mentioned his name earlier. Rika Salonen, one of the best women's players to ever play the game, a 3-time European champion, also a silver and a bronze medalist at the Olympic Games. Or actually, no, just a bronze medalist at the Olympic Games, 2 bronze medals within 20 years of each other for Salonen. And the Sedin twins, both of them making the Hockey Hall of Fame. So 6 will be entered in the upcoming class. What are your thoughts on these 6 names?
Well, remember, it's a dual class in a sense, because 2021 wiped out, adding a new class of players. And I think that makes this one stronger just by necessity. I think it's about time for Daniel Alfredsson. I think it's really cool that you're going to have 3 Canucks, that were part of those great teams in Vancouver, and Luongo and the Sedin twins going in together. It's a stacked roster, and I don't see anyone could really quibble with it. I mean, I guess you might say someone like Alex McGillney should be in there ahead of, a certain player. I guess that's maybe the quibbling, but to me, these are all no doubt Hall of Famers. I don't know why it took so long for Alfredsson. That one always confused me. I mean, it's a Hockey Hall of Fame. The guy competed in 5 Olympics and also had a, marvelous career, was a franchise cornerstone for a newer team at the time in Ottawa. Won a Calder Trophy. So, he had individual success. It's going to be a cool night. I think just with, having 3 Swedes, having 3 former Canucks, having a female player from, not Canada or the US, and Salonen, which is a first. And obviously a great honor for Herb Carnegie's family. He passed away years ago, but I think it's a solid class from top to bottom. And I don't have any, there's no part of me going like, I'm not sure about that one. Like they're all no doubters to me.
Absolutely. Did you notice over the last few days heading into Monday's announcement, the uprising in attention to the hashtag Alfie to the Hall? It seems as if the Ottawa Senators fandom were making their voices heard, saying, hey, we hope Daniel Alfredsson makes it. And I was trying to make the case for myself over the weekend. I mean, look, he represented the city so well, but I was trying to think, like, does he deserve to be a Hall of Famer? And I came to the conclusion that yes, because of the points he was able to put up, because of his success internationally as well, because of what he meant to the market as well, it made sense to me to have him in the Hall of Fame. So I'm glad they at least got that right. Yeah,
the sickos in Ottawa, the fan base rallies around that. Like they're kind of the little team that could sometimes, but they got a really powerful social media following, a lot of loyal fans, and they might have played a role in it a little bit. Because I'm a little confused on the timing. Like, I think this was maybe the 4th time he's been eligible. It's been a while.
Specifically, I mean,
it's been a while, and to me, it was clear he was going to get there. So, really one of the players I covered early in my career, Julian, that I have a ton of respect for. I really have a respect for all the Sedins and Luongo as well. But, living in Toronto, I was around Alfredsson more. In fact, the very first game I covered in the press box for the Canadian Press was during the 2002 playoffs, when Alfredsson hit Darcy Tucker from behind in Game 5 and scored the winning goal right after, like a total villain move. And I actually once, during the awards in Vegas, I once had a chance to have a drink with Alfie, and I brought that up, and he was saying it was like, for him, it was like one of the favorite moments of his career too. Because he really was, back in those Toronto-Ottawa series, he was sort of painted as a villain. I'm not sure it's entirely fair, because when you know him, he's a really gentle guy. He's done tons of great work off ice for mental health causes. Really is not your typical villain, but in the hockey context, he played that role well.
What year was it where Alfredsson made fun of his fellow Swede, Mats Sundin, when he chucked his stick into the crowd, and Alfredsson acted as if he was going to do it, but he didn't do it? I'm trying to remember what year that happened.
It was the same era, right? It was when the Leafs and Senators seemed to play in the playoffs every year, and so there's the heightened rivalry thing going on, and it was, I can't give you the year, but it's somewhere in that like 01 to 04, 05, 06 kind of timeline. And the Senators were rising then. that team 2007, they could have won the cup. They got to the final and ran out of juice, but when you had Alfredson, Heatley, and Spezza on the line, I mean that was as dynamic as it went for 2 seasons there in Ottawa, and so I do think Alfredson is a Hall of Famer. I just, to me, a Hall of Famer, like, some of it is numbers, right? Some of it is feel. Like, was this person, are they what we're talking about Cale Makar right now? Like, I'm pretty sure Cale Makar one day will be a Hall of Famer. It'll be many years in the future.
Me too.
But we're going to say, like, he was the best at his position and he changed the way players did this or that. And then, some of it is sort of narrative based, frankly. And like, Alfredson was the going concern on the Ottawa Senators. He was what made them relevant. He did it for a long, long, long time. He has the numbers. He has the international experience. I think it's some sort of combination of that. It's not a perfect, you can't just put it in a computer and spit out a formula, because some players might accrue the numbers, but not really have ever felt like a Hall of Fame, right? For me, he feels like one, and it's going to be cool to see him get inducted in November.
And what about the Sedins? I know a lot of people were wondering if the Sedins were worth putting in together, considering what they were able to do together, obviously with their one franchise. I think it's just they're special tandem. The fact that they've been just almost joined at the hip pretty much since they were drafted by Brian Burke. Like, I really enjoyed watching those two do their thing in Vancouver. And of course, with Roberto Luongo between the pipes and him getting the job done at the 2010 Olympics, that will always stand out for me when it comes to Roberto Luongo, on top of his tweets and other nonsensical stuff that he's done over his career. But to see the Canucks be so well represented, that is really cool to see. Well,
it was a great team. It's fitting. I mean, if they didn't get the injuries they got in that series against the Bruins, maybe they win. I mean, they got to Game 7. They had certainly every chance to get it done. The Sedins, it's a crazy story, right? Twin brothers drafted 2nd and 3rd overall to the same team. At one point, when they were playing, I remember I went and used like the natural stat trick, time spent with a teammate tool, and I don't think they had ice time for their whole careers, but what they had, like, they'd spent like 93% of their time on the ice at the same time. Like, it's an insane ratio. And then to go into the Hall of Fame together, it only feels right. It's maybe a disservice that we just refer to them as the Sedins, right? It's almost like they're a singular item, but of course there were 2 players, but they played a possession style in their era that has become more common now, but they were doing it beforehand, right? They would set up shop in the offensive zone and knew where each other were going to be and cycle around and twist defenses into knots and create scoring opportunities that way. And, they each won an individual MVP award during their career. And so, yeah, like, it's just special careers. And again, humanitarians off the ice donated tons of money to charitable hospital foundations in Vancouver area. They still live there. I think it's actually going to be really neat to see everyone going together. I think we're talking about the emotions of the Cup final. Those will be different kind of emotions, but it'll be pretty cool seeing all the old Canucks come out. I'm sure we'll show out for that one.
Absolutely. And I encourage everyone who might not be as familiar with Riikka Salonen to check her resume as one of the most decorated women's players to ever do it. We're talking about a 2-time bronze medalist at the Olympic Games and a 3-time European champion. Also has won a silver medal for Finland at the World Hockey Championship. I didn't know anything about them before the announcement, and I took the time just to look her up a little bit before. What an incredible resume, even if they don't have a gold medal at the World Championship or at the Olympics. We're talking about one of the best women's players. We're talking about one of the best hockey players, period. I think she is the oldest player from Finland to win a medal at the Olympic Games, surpassing the record previously set by Teemu Selanne, actually.
Right. And the top level of the women's sport has been so dominated by Canada and the US historically. It's been hard if you were a player from Finland or Sweden or Russia to win the kind of medals you're talking about. And so, if you stack it up against the Canadians player's resume, from that era, or American Cameron Granato, or, it doesn't look quite the same, but I think context is important when you're judging that. And you're talking about one of the pioneers in a country that's still finding its way, at the top level of women's hockey.
Absolutely. And also that goes for Herb Carnegie, who, again, I mentioned it off the top, the best Black player to have never played in the National Hockey League. He has endured his share of racism. There's an alleged story that went around when he was just perhaps maybe on the cusp of making it to the NHL, but the Leafs owner, Conn Smythe, this was an alleged story that, he would have wanted him on his team if he was white, may have even wanted to pay out $10,000 to have someone turn him white. Again, that's an alleged story that seems as if in terms of the telling of it, there may be some errors and some inconsistencies there, but that is an alleged story that has spread around with him. But he is someone who's known for creating hockey schools to develop players from his time being around the game, eventually named to the Order of Canada as well. Got to play with a young Jean Béliveau when he was playing in Quebec as well. He is someone else whose story should be worth your time. If you could take the time to look up the story of Herb Carnegie, do that as well. I think everyone in this Hockey Hall of Fame announcement is deserving, but it was just for me personally to see Herb Carnegie's name be mentioned, even as a builder, it was really nice to see him mentioned among those 6.
Absolutely.
Now, our next partner is a pretty cool product. Let's talk about Athletic Greens. If you're looking to get better gut health, more energy, or a stronger immune system in a really easy, natural way, you've got to check out Athletic Greens. I'm sure you'll all agree that most of us are not huge fans of having to take a bunch of pills or vitamins in the morning, but with Athletic Greens, you can get rid of all those extra vitamin bottles and finally make some room in your cabinet. Athletic Greens is an all-in-one solution that actually tastes good. You'll really enjoy actually getting your daily vitamins in through them. What is this stuff actually? With one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and even aging. All of the things. Like that's pretty cool. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, daily free, or gluten free, and contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals, or artificial anything, while still tasting good. It will cost you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. So you don't have to go out to the store, go to Starbucks all the time. Invest in some Athletic Greens. It has over 7,000 5-star reviews, recommended by professional athletes and trusted by leading health experts such as Tim Ferriss and Michael Gervais. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/Johnston. athleticgreens.com/Johnston to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. And with that, it is time for Ask CJ, where we take in questions from the Twitter world, the Discord world as well. We're going to take a few from all of you. Thank you all so much for sending in those questions, by the way. Let's get started with Sam S. from MTL. Gee, I wonder what team he might support or what team he might be interested in. What's going on with Josh Anderson trade situation?
The Canadians are listening. I think that they don't have to move Josh Anderson, but, they also don't feel maybe that they need to keep him because, his age, it's not quite the same as the Arturi Lehkonen one because Anderson signed long-term, did sign a big deal after the Canadians acquired him from Columbus originally, but he's a player that's drawn a fair amount of interest from around the league because of how he plays. I think teams look at him and think that's the kind of guy you want in a tough game in a playoff series because he's big and physical, gets in on the forecheck, puts up a little bit of offense for you. And so I don't know. It's hard to assign odds to the likelihood he's moved. It's definitely possible, but it's not like that they feel like they have to get him off the roster. It's more, I think in this case, it's more of an indication of the interest teams have in him versus Montreal trying to sell him.
Next question from Sorokin Fan Club. Does the Trotz news from Friday make his dismissal from the Isles look better in retrospect? Lou might have sensed Barry was burnt out.
Well, look, my understanding is Lou Lamoriello and Barry Trotz have a great relationship. So, I think that it was a very difficult season for Barry. He left the team at one point. His mother died. That dealt with COVID situation. I just think it's a really demanding job. And remember, Paul Maurice stepped down from the Winnipeg Jets and was quite open about sort of signs of burnout that he was feeling. It's been a challenging time in the pandemic. And you look at guys like Trotz and Maurice. I mean, they've been coaching consecutively in the league essentially since I was a little kid. So, they've done this a lot. And maybe it does make it look better. I think also they really like Lane Lambert with the Islanders. And I think he would have been a candidate for other head coaching positions, had they not made that move. And so I think it's a combination of both. And, I don't know that it's a bad move by the Islanders. And certainly maybe it's a blessing in disguise for Barry Trotz because does appear he's going to get more time to step back from the game. I know there's still an offer on the table to join the Predators front office in some form. He hasn't made a call on that just yet, but it seems like his inclination is to take some time to be with his family and get to some other projects and the like, and then maybe return to coaching down the road.
Let's take this next one from Harry Wright, 19OT. With Sens president Anthony Leblanc saying Sens have free will to spend up to $76 million this season on players, who's the most likely target for a big acquisition?
Well, the one you want me to say, I think, is Claude Giroux. I don't know that that's going to happen.
Oh, I'm not trying to put it in your direction, but if you're going to put his name out there, I mean, why not?
Well, he's got deep ties to the Ottawa area, of course. I don't know if they're going to be able to get him. I think Claude Giroux would prefer to stay in Florida, after the trade there from Philadelphia. He was comfortable there. He liked it. We'll see if there's a deal to be made that makes sense for him. Ottawa's got some needs, though. And they're in the middle of restructuring their front office a little bit, hiring a new assistant general manager. I think maybe Waters settling with the board operating the team, since Eugene Melnick's passing. And, I don't know that I wouldn't say they're going to be bidding for like the top 5 guys on all these free agent lists you're going to read in the next 2 weeks. But, the secondary market should offer them some players, and, they can't have a repeat of this last season. So, I think they're going to have to spend money and bring in some trusted veterans and try to get better that way, because, there's a fair amount of expectation growing around that group that they need to have a breakthrough and move forward.
From Florida man Matt Maroon off Discord, what is in CJ's ideal burrito?
Love it. Well, beef, cheese, some sort of salsa. Mm-hmm. Basically nothing healthy, like sour cream, a little avocado or something like that, like some corn, something like that. I can't say I eat a lot of burritos, but I appreciate the burrito. But the key is the beef and the cheese for me. But yeah, do you got any good burrito spots in Montreal for next week, Julian, or what? Because we're coming to town.
That's a very great question. There's one place whose name has literally escaped my mind, but I know it's near Mount Royal Metro. And as soon as I figure out what that name is, I will mention that name, because I went there once and it was probably the best place I've ever gone for a burrito. So I will find that name like ASAP, because that was a really great place. I imagine with the contents of your burrito, you're eating that after you go on your daily run.
Yes, a burrito is not a run-friendly food. Like that's not fuel for the run. That's a reward for all the work you've done.
Oh yeah, that's if you eat that before, that's fuel for you. Just farting the entire run. You're passing gas the entire time.
Oh, we're in the ditch. We're in the ditch.
Oh man, speaking of next week, you're gonna be in town. So does that mean we get to do a show in person, or
I don't know. We got to figure out the Thursday show, right? That's going to be a crazy show because it's the first day of the draft.
Yeah,
but we're gonna have
the second day because it's the 8th. or do I have the calendar in front of me?
I think it's Thursday and Friday, the draft in my head.
Okay. Yeah, I'm stupid. So the 7th is the Thursday. So it's the first day of the draft. So yeah, that is going to be a hectic day.
So we'll have to figure out how that all goes down. I know I'm going to take a run up Mount Royal.
Yes.
And, I love doing that when I'm in town. We're going to have the SDP fan appreciation event.
Yes, on the Friday. That's on the 8th.
I think there's like a staff meeting there or something. Do we have a lunch? I don't know. It's weird. Like Steve Dangle and Adam Wilde are our bosses, man. I think they're calling an all hands meeting, maybe to who knows what. Hopefully we're still around next season.
So just so you heard it here first, there may or may not be an episode in person of the Chris Johnston Show next week ahead of the 2022 NHL entry draft. Final question from Red Shark back. In light of Nicolas Aubé-Kubel damaging the Stanley Cup, what's your favorite Stanley Cup getting damaged story?
It might be that one, really. I mean,
Seriously.
I remember it was the Washington Capitals that like bent in the bowl because they were all doing keg stands on it. So they had to ban keg stands on the Washington Capitals tour. I mean, has any team in recent memory more openly partied with the cup than the Capitals? Like those guys went to town after that cup. But I loved all the pictures going around of like all the Avs players being like it was like a moment frozen in time where he smashed the cup. And I actually saw Mike Bolt and Phil Pritchard on the ice, two of the cup keepers, and they were like, "Oh man, they've had it for 5 minutes and it's already smashed." But let's face it, that it takes some abuse. Every year it goes back to the silversmith and gets repaired. And I think it was an accident. It was an innocent mistake, but yeah, probably the Capitals keg stands cup or even that one last night. That one's going right to the top of the list because it's during the celebratory photo. And the fact I saw the cup keepers and they're like a parent who just like saw their kid like fall on the playground like the minute they got there. It's just like we knew this was going to happen eventually, but no one's even had a drink yet. Like what's going on? So
ridiculous. But hey, the Stanley Cup is theirs, dent and all, for the Colorado Avalanche, Stanley Cup champions of the year 2022. That's going to do it for this Monday edition of the CJ Show. CJ, get yourself some sleep, buddy. I feel for you. You only had 3 hours.
3 hours, and I got to go for my run now. So,
man,
got to keep the run streak alive. So, got to have a run, a shower, and I'll probably be in bed at 8:00 tonight.
Okay, so stick taps coming on Thursday. Thank you to producer Nick, as always, for producing our great show. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and check out all the other great content here on the SDPN channel, whether on YouTube or throughout some of the other podcasts that are put out. For CJ, I'm Julian. So long and peace. You look at him punching the air. He's doing CJ. You look like Rocky.
Oh, I need to go to bed.
You need to go to bed, sir. Bye, guys.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's sportsbook.
Inside the game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.